special operations in an EOD, we are risk takers. It's calculated risk. We evaluate the risk. We find the opportunity, and then we move out. And we don't always get it right. And that's part of our training. Now, with explosives, you have to always get it right. Initial success or total failure.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazzo, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. And today's guest is a Navy deep sea diver and explosive ordnance disposal officer. And he has led missions to locate, diffuse, and detonate explosives on land and underwater. He's won a Bronze Star in the Navy and has served for 26 years. He is an accomplished leader, business owner, an award-winning CEO. He is huge on leadership. He even has a book called Elevate Your Leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited to talk to this guest. I introduce you, Robert Pizzini. Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Hey, thank you, Gina. I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Oh, so I've never had an EOD on the show before, and it's really exciting for me to have just a new special ops, division. So can you share with us what exactly an EOD is?
Sure. So EOD is the letters for Explosive Ordnance Disposal. So in Navy EOD, we are a special operating force, meaning we have all the special operations capability, free fall, parachute insertion capability, what we call Hurst cast. So all the helicopter stuff, rappelling and fast roping, all the shooting skills, all the communication skills. So shoot, move, communicate. So that's what makes Navy EOD a special operating force. What we do is search for, locate, identify, and disarm or detonate explosives of all types, to include chemical, radiological, biological, nuclear, and conventional explosives of all types. So IEDs are very it's a household word these days, but IEDs have been a bread and butter skill for EOD since the inception of EOD. Really back in 1953 is when the Navy formally established the Explosive Ordnance Disposal community. So we work in teams, platoons, if you will. Again, very similar to the special forces operating structures that you're probably familiar with. So we have a mobile unit, which is a parent company. That mobile unit will have 3 platoons or 3 companies rather, and each company has 3 platoons. That's kind of our force structure, if you will. And then above that level, above the mobile unit level, at what the Army will call the brigade level, we call it the group level. So you have 3 mobile units. And again, each mobile unit has 3 companies. Each company has 3 platoons. And we are all over the world doing all kinds of cool things. My career spanned 26 years, and it was incredible. And I served with incredible people. And a big part of Navy EOD is being a great teammate, and good teammates don't talk too much. So I'm going to pause right there. And
well, you were a diver at 12 and you wanted to go into the Navy. So did you know what EOD was as you were going into it? Like, how did you get into where you ended up?
Yeah, so I was a diver at 12. I grew up watching the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, and I was just fascinated with the underwater realm. And so I was a certified diver at 12. I went to commercial dive school before I was 18, before I graduated high school, and thought that's what I wanted to do. And then on the library shelf in the library at Tremper High School in Little Oak, Kenosha, Wisconsin, was this book called Navy Diver. And I read the book. And a friend of mine, my best friend, actually, his older brother joined the Navy and was home from boot camp wearing his uniform. And so I just decided that I wanted to be a Navy diver before I graduated high school.
How was that process for you? Was it like, how'd you train for this? Like, was there
Sure.
Was there like, how does this part work?
Yeah. So in high school, I was athletic. I wasn't an athlete. I think I pretty much left sports in 10th or 11th grade. I mean, I grew up playing hockey and I wrestled and I played tennis and I played baseball and football and I did all the sports. But diving really took over my life in high school, and I worked at the local dive shop. But when I came in the Navy, there was no guarantee, there was no contract that you were going to go to Navy dive school. You came in the Navy, and in boot camp, we took the PT test, and the PT test is swim, run, push up, sit up, pull up, and I did all that. And it's interesting because the first thing you do is the swim, and 30 people show up for the swim, and 4 of us finish the swim successfully. And it's not a terribly challenging swim, but if you're not a swimmer, you're just not prepared for that. It's really simple. And the same thing with the run and sit-ups and push-ups and pull-ups. So I got through the PT test, and it was a Navy SEAL, and I didn't know what a SEAL was at the time either. This is back in 1984. But the SEAL who gave us the PT test, he said, okay, you successfully passed the test, go to medical, take this quick medical exam, and then, we'll adjust your orders and send you guys to dive school. So I went to medical, and the eye exam, I failed. And so the corpsman said, you can't be a Navy diver. Your vision is too poor. So I left that eye exam with tears in my eyes because all I wanted to do was be a Navy diver. And I went through this reclassification process where now I'm selected a new career field, which is advanced electronics, something I wasn't particularly interested in, but my test scores, my entry level test scores called the ASVAB, qualified me for pretty much anything. And while I was in that advanced electronics school, I went and took another eye test. And this time they said my eyes were good and qualified to be a Navy diver. So I went back to the electronics school and told them what had happened. And, there's been a mistake and we got to change my orders. And at that time, the leadership said, no, you're locked into this advanced electronics contract for 6 years. So in 6 years, you can apply. And I had to soul search, and I had to do whatever I could to get out of that contract, which I eventually did. I didn't pass my next few tests in that school, and I was released from that school and sent to Navy dive school a week later in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. So at the age of 19, I graduated Navy dive school in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and that till this day remains one of the most memorable moments in my life.
So you purposely failed those tests so you would be released to get out. Now, did anyone tell you and give you advice on how to get a contract, or you just kind of figured that was your way out?
There's something called the detailer. These are the people who sit at that time in Washington, D.C., and they write everybody's orders for who's going where around the world. And the diving detailer is the one I was talking to. And what he told me was, look, I'm not telling you what to do. He said, I can't touch you right now. He said, but if and when that school releases you, I will see it and I will pick you up and send you to dive school. So I had that kind of in my back pocket, if you will. But again, I'm 18 years old. I've been in the Navy for 4 months.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was as junior as you can be.
Yeah. And, it was a bold move.
it was. And again, I did soul searching, and I told myself I joined to be a Navy diver, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. And if that risks getting in trouble or getting kicked out of the Navy, then so be it.
So what exactly is your training? Like, is it, because everyone that we've had on the show so far, they've all been Navy SEALs, and being that I did special ops prep school, and stuff. What did you have anything that was similar in terms of training, like buds or a Hell Week or anything that was just like, whoa?
So a Navy dive school. Now I've been through dive school twice. Once as a second class diver, and I'll explain that, and then once as a first class diver, and then I was a dive school instructor for 3 years for EOD dive school. So in second class dive school, again, there's the PT test just to qualify to get there. And then there's your your ASVAB scores have to be at a certain level. And that gets you there. The day you get there, you get the PT test again. And if you didn't pass it, you're gone. And so PT, like in BUDS and like in other special operations programs, PT is a daily activity, certainly highly intense in the morning, but usually there'll be some form of PT throughout the day. So whether it's an afternoon base swim or some afternoon O course or some other activity. So heavy PT first thing in the morning, and then various phases of PT throughout the day. In and around the classroom, the academic training that we go through, and then the laboratory. The way Navy training is set up, it's classroom, lab, field. So physics of diving. We sit in a classroom and we are taught the physics of diving, the hazards of diving, the medical implications in diving. And then in a lab setting, we walk through the different procedures, emergency procedures, operating procedures, and then out in the field, or in this case, out maybe off of a diving craft or a diving platform out in the water, we conduct that training, that the actual diving activities. In terms of a hell week, we have something called pool week. So pool week is basically the culmination of the scuba qualification. And in pool week, we have something called problem solving. Sometimes it's called pool harassment. But in problem solving, either as a single diver or in buddy pairs, you swim around the bottom of the pool, breathing scuba, and instructors on a breath hold will come from the surface, and the pool's about 10 feet deep, and they will shake and disorient and turn your air off and try and take your air away from you and rip off your mask and rip off your fins and sometimes rip off your shirt. And the whole purpose of that is to train us to remain calm. The hit's going to go away in a reasonable amount of time. Remain calm throughout that turmoil. Stay connected to your buddy if it's a buddy dive. And when the commotion ends, you have to recover, put yourself back together, restore all your equipment to normal operating status. And this can be very challenging for some people. And I remember when I was in second class dive school in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, I'm 19 years old. A lot of my classmates had been to the fleet already. So they're what we call fleet returnees. So they had rank, they had experience. In one case, this gentleman was an E5 or a second class petty officer. So a fleet returnee, college swimmer, California golden boy, the guy just had it all going on. And, I was somewhat intimidated. Again, this 19-year-old who really didn't know much. And he didn't make it through the pool harassment, through that problem solving. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, that guy who I was certain would just not have any difficulty in dive school didn't make it through a phase that I didn't find particularly difficult. And so for me, that really boosted my confidence. And my teammates, there were some other young kids in there, just like me, brand new to the Navy. And it really boosted our confidence. And there's a whole nother reason why people don't make it through BUDS or through dive school. And it has a lot to do with their upbringing and how much adversity they faced in their childhood. But anyway, so in this case, I made it through pool week. Pool week is kind of the culmination. Once you make it through pool week, then the remaining 8 weeks or 10 weeks of training are not as intense. It's really focused on mission and really becoming a good teammate.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by my absolute favorite company. If you know me or seen videos or photos of me, then you know I always have one on my wrist. I absolutely adore this company, DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com is the world's first smart crystal bracelet. Every single bracelet is handmade in the USA using real, genuine crystals made on memory wire. Every bracelet is unisex and They're also aromatherapy. The cool part is the black onyx charm that is on the bracelet. It scans to your cell phone, connecting you to their Wellness Hub Elevate. You can also access their Wellness Hub Elevate on your computer or tablet. You just have to sign into your account. The bracelet gives you a 12-month membership. It has over 200 pieces of self-care content, from motivational tips, meditations, breathing exercises, exercises around the theme of your bracelet, printable journals, and so much more. The content is ever growing. And that's not all. The bracelet also gives you lifetime access to their Elevate Together Club, which meets monthly via Zoom. Each month is themed to give you actionable takeaways to elevate your life. And with this podcast episode, you get 40% off your purchase order by using the code Mindset Podcast. Use that code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Just go to discoveromnia.com. Discoveromnia.com, code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Get your bracelet today. Did you have a lot of adversity growing up to be able to deal with that? For me, that would be a nightmare, the pool situation. I'm scared of the water. There's just a lot going on. I'm the type of person, I close my eyes in a pool and I open it thinking a shark's going to be in front of my face, which is so unrealistic, but it's just something you think about. So it's scary for me. But for you, did you have that adversity growing up where you learned to stay calm? You're in a lot of stressful situations.
For sure. There's no doubt about it. I grew up without a father. My father died in a car accident when I was 4 years old. So I didn't have, that component of development. So for me, it was a lot of trial and error, mostly error. But I played hockey, and through hockey, there's adversity, I guess you could say. There's challenge, there's grit, there's pain, and there's effort, and there's focus on your teammates. So I think more than anything, the sport of hockey prepared me. And ironically, there's a lot of hockey players in special operations. So I just got back from Boston, where an entire hockey team of Navy SEALs played against the Boston Bruins alumni. Wow. And and we lost 2-1. I mean, so, we're active duty military people playing against former NHL. And when I say former, for all the puckheads out there, Bergeron, who was the captain of the Boston Bruins until last year, played in this alumni game. So, I mean, this guy is still world class, and here he is skating against us. So I faced adversity in those areas, not having a father, being a hockey player. And of course, when I was a kid, things were so much different. We didn't have electronics. We were outside, getting hurt, doing all kinds of crazy things. And we stayed out past when the street lights came on. And but in high school, I was starting to make some poor decisions. And I knew that. And so that was another reason that I really felt, compelled to join the Navy. There was a factor of discipline that I needed, that I didn't have growing up, in spite of the sports and everything. And so I think that I think I craved that, and I think it worked out well.
So I want to talk about two things that you touched base on. But before I do, I want to ask you, how many people were in your class, and then how many people graduated?
Sure. So we probably started with 20 or 25, and we graduated, I believe it was 11.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So, and I know we're going to talk about EOD school next, but that was same thing in EOD school. The attrition rate is very high. It's in the neighborhood of 50%, maybe a little bit higher.
And you mentioned teamwork from hockey, and you also mentioned discipline, and you mentioned how you didn't have that discipline. You going into the military, you get that discipline, and you also mentioned with teamwork. I know from Team Eagle One, teamwork is so important. So did you feel how did you end up developing the discipline within yourself from having no discipline And how did you understand that teamwork at such a young age? Because at that, I just feel like, just for myself, like at a young age, like we're very me central, and how do you take it off of you, or where did you learn to take it off of you and throw it into the team?
Sure. So, it was a ongoing process. It's something that I continually learned throughout my entire career. It certainly started at dive school. And it's very unique because of all the jobs in the Navy, in special operations, we have these small teams. A team of two. Our smallest element or unit of deployment is a 2-man team. So we have to rely on each other. And I think what you've heard from other people is my job in being a good teammate is to take care of the person to the right of me and the person to the left of me. And in Navy diving, and certainly in Navy EOD, when we're dealing with explosives, the better I can take care of that person, the more likely we are to succeed. And what you learn over time, and the reason I say is this extends over time, is because we learn all of these different ways to take care of each other over time. And I'm going to give you a crystal clear example.
Yes, please.
A friend of mine has a podcast. It's called the Echo Oscar Delta. I don't know if you heard of it or not, but it's an EOD centric podcast. The guy who runs it, he's an active duty guy, and he finds retired guys like me. He finds people who retired way before I did. He interviews people on active duty. Well, he just went and did a podcast with somebody out in Washington State. And towards the end of the podcast, this guy says, "Hey, by the way, I want to give a shout out to Bob Pizzini. I haven't seen Bob in 18 years, and I didn't know him very well when he was on active duty. But when my father died, Bob brought his entire team to my father's funeral." And he said, "I'll never forget that." And that was 18 years ago. And so that's being a good teammate. That is something that you learn over time. There's all these other ways to take care of your teammates and be a good teammate.
And how did you learn discipline? How did you develop that? Yeah.
Pretty much the hard way.
Yeah.
So, so discipline. So in EOD, in special operations and in EOD, we are risk takers. It's calculated risk. We evaluate the risk. We find the opportunity, and then we move out. And we don't always get it right. And that's part of our training. Now, with explosives, you have to always get it right. We have a saying, initial success or total failure. With explosives, you have to get it right. So the discipline within EOD comes from just that. It comes from the fact that, while we are on the problem, while we're addressing the problem, we have to get it right. But we also have to improvise quite often. We have procedures and publications and things that tell us how to deal with a nuclear weapon or an IED or a conventional ordnance, a bomb that was dropped that didn't detonate for whatever reason, or something that partially detonated, or other what are called explosive remnants of war. We have procedures that tell us how to deal with all that, but there's not a rock solid procedure for every single thing we come across. So we have to, as a team, we have to come up with alternate plans or strategies to address these things. So you develop discipline very quickly and very methodically, in the fact that if I cut the wrong wire, if you will, just to really simplify it, it's going to be a bad day, not only for me, but potentially for other people. So that's where I think a real sense of discipline comes in. The other sense of discipline is when you're in a leadership position and you're training others, or others are looking to follow your lead or follow your guidance. You have to be disciplined in that capacity. If you're a leader, people are always looking at you. They look at the kind of shoes you wear. They look at how you comb your hair. They look at your uniform. Is it within regulations? Are you following the rules? And so you have to be conscious of that. And that really develops discipline as well.
How do you train for always having to be right?
So in EOD school, and just real quick, from Navy diving to EOD, I was a Navy diver. I went to second class dive school. Then I went to first class dive school. First class dive school is where you learn the supervisory skills and the deep sea mixed gas, the complexity of diving. But really, it's where you become a diving supervisor, which means you're in charge of the diving operation. So when I was a first class diver and I was supervising hundreds of dives, traveling around the world, I discovered EOD. And I thought to myself, wow, when I really learned what EOD was, I thought that is exactly what I want to do. That's where I want to go. And part of that discovery was the schooling, the continual schooling and learning that Navy EOD technicians go through. Our initial training is about a year, but there are so many schools that we go to after that. Highly classified schools, highly complex schools, schools that teach skill sets that nobody even knows exists. And that is that's a learning environment. Marty Strong, who I know you know.
Yeah, on the show.
Marty said in his observation that Navy EOD technicians are learning machines and problem solvers. So going to answer your question, how do you develop that discipline to where you always have to get it right? EOD school is intense, to say the least. Again, there's the classroom component, which is the academic component. There's the lab. And in the lab, where if I cut the wrong wire, there's a penalty. And the penalty, instead of a detonation, instead of current going to a blasting cap that's connected to high explosives that will detonate the high explosive, we have current go to a buzzer, or we'll have current go to a blasting cap that will detonate a small amount of explosives, enough to get your attention, whether it's a buzzer or a smaller amount of explosives. We call these monitors. When you get it wrong and that monitor goes off, it really gets your attention. And you say to yourself, I just died. I just killed, again, this isn't training. I just killed myself. I just killed my team. It's a terrible feeling. What did I do wrong? How did I get that wrong? And we learn. You get it wrong once or twice or maybe 3 times. And the instructors will only let you get it wrong so many times before you're either rolled back or you're dropped out of the program. So you have to adapt and learn quickly. And again, it really comes from that academic component. We're talking about circuitry. We're talking about what's called an explosive train. So you have your fusing or firing device, you have blasting cap, you have booster, you have explosive, and then you could have other ways to function, especially with IEDs, command wire, remote, cell phone. There's all these different ways. So you have to learn all that. You have to understand it's all out there. You have to isolate the problem that you have at the moment, and then use your tools and use your procedures and rely on your teammates to get you through that moment.
So that's serious pressure. Serious pressure in like you said, it really hits you. I just died. That's an intense statement right there. What is going on in your mind as you are like figuring this out to not die?
So there's a few things. One is you have to be in the moment, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that's not easy for everybody, because we all have lives outside of, being a Navy EOD technician. We have wives, there's women in EOD. So we have wives, we have husbands, we have kids, we have dogs that need to go to the vet. We have a car that needs to go to the shop. Sometimes we're dealing with financial issues. All these things can take you out of the moment. and you have to be in the moment. You can't be distracted. You have to be focused. And that's why physical fitness is a key part of being in any special operating force, because physical fitness drives mental fitness, and that drives mental discipline, and that allows you to be in the moment when you need to be.
Wow. So you're not only just you're physical training every single day, you're mentally training every single day. How do you push through the tired? It sounds exhausting, right? How do you stay in it and not get out of it?
Sure. So there's several ways. I would say the primary one, as odd as it sounds, is through humor. So, we can't take ourselves too serious. There's very serious moments that we have to deal with, but at the end of the day, we can't take ourselves too serious. And I don't know what it is about EOD and SEALs and Navy divers, but we make the most offhand jokes at the wrong moments. And this humor brings levity. It grounds us. It reminds us not to take ourselves too serious. And it helps get us through these times. So humor, I think, is one of those things. And then I was stationed overseas. My first EOD mobile unit was Mobile Unit 8 in Italy. My second mobile unit after my instructor tour was Mobile Unit 5 in Guam. So when you're stationed overseas, when you're off duty, we spend a lot of time together as well with our families. Guys who are stationed here in the U.S., that's not so much the case. So the unit could be here in Virginia Beach. One person lives in Suffolk, which is an hour in one direction, and somebody else lives in Williamsburg, which is an hour in the opposite direction. And in the U.S., there's so many other things. Our families are here, and there's so many other things that take our time and attention when we're off duty. So we don't tend to hang out with our teammates off duty in the U.S., but we do overseas, and that's a big part of it because we get to know each other's families so well, and what's beautiful about that, and this applies in the U.S. as well, is when somebody's deployed, we really look out for each other's families. If the fence needs to be repaired, if the son or daughter needs to get to a sporting event or some after school type of activity, we really look after each other. And I think those are, again, being a good teammate, right? So those are the things that help keep me grounded anyway, help keep my focus and keep my head in the game.
What was or can you share with us a story of like where you were under real pressure, and then what was going through, how you stayed calm, how you made it through?
Sure. I could share several. But I'll share one that was completely self-inflicted, where I wasn't in the moment, and it put me in a very dangerous situation. So I mentioned I was stationed in Guam. So there's a lot of World War II ordnance explosives all in and around Guam, on Guam itself, on the beaches, underwater, in the harbor. So we were diving in the harbor, and we were recovering these bombs. If I recall correctly, they were 8-inch rounds. So these bombs that are about this big, about that round and about that long, and each of them weighs about 40 pounds. And a crate of them from World War II had spilled open on the floor of the harbor in Apra Harbor in Guam. And our job was to dive, and we would pick these things up and put them in a big basket that was placed on the bottom by a surface craft. And then after we loaded all these things in the basket and went back to the surface craft would then bring all these bombs up to the surface, and then we would take them out to the range and detonate them, dispose of them. So when it was my turn to dive, my diving partner was somebody I was stationed with for many, many years. His name is Leon. And we were both commissioned officers at the time. We were both what were called limited duty officers. So we were prior enlisted, and then became line officers in the Navy. And so it's kind of a joke, oh no, don't get two officers diving together. There's going to be a problem. But Leon and I had a lot of experience. Well, we're in 90 feet of water. The water's fairly clear until we start moving from the pile to the basket. It's about 10 feet. And then a lot of sand and mud and all that starts kicking up. And so the visibility pretty much went to zero. And we were walking past each other. He'd grab one and go, I'd grab one and go. And so we're just kind of moving back and forth. And the Navy diving, the Navy diving community had just changed to a new valve on our air tank. So we used to have what was called a J valve, and it had this little mechanism that gave you about 300 pounds of reserve air. Well, we switched to something called a K valve, which has no reserve valve at all. And the theory is, hey, you have a pressure gauge, you look at your pressure gauge, and you know when it's time to come up. And the other thing is, when you start running out of air, the draw on your regulator becomes a little more restricted. So you know when your air is getting low. So my air was getting low, and I felt the regulator start to draw a little heavy. Looked at my pressure gauge, and the needle moves a lot when you do that inhale and then exhale. And I thought, okay, I'm going to grab one more bullet, drop it in the basket, flip my reserve, and head to the surface. I grabbed that one more bullet, dropped it in the basket, ran completely out of air, went for the reserve, which I didn't have. So I'm in 90 feet of water, completely out of air. I can either go that way, but 90 feet's a long way to go, or I could go that way and look for Leon, because we all carry a spare regulator for, emergency situations. And I decided to go look for Leon. And we were wearing full face masks, even though we're diving scuba. And so I went in that direction, and it didn't take but 4 or 5 seconds, and boom, walked right into him. And he saw me rip my mask off. I gave the signal. He handed the emergency regulator to me. We hugged each other and went to the surface. So had I decided to go up, it's questionable whether or not I would have made it. So in that moment, I made the right decision. But more importantly, Leon saw I was in peril and immediately provided the assistance that we had been trained to provide, and put me in that bear hug and made sure that I made it to the surface. So that's
that's a story. So let me ask you, because I'm curious for myself. I overthink. I'm an overthinker. It's, women, we do that. Okay. You have a split second to go up or right. It's quick, and you don't know what's right or wrong. And I guess in a way, like, if you're wrong, it's over. You don't, you can't think, and if you're right, but how do you make that quick split second decision? How do you not overthink?
Well, in that case, I had 1 second to make a decision or less. Mm-hmm. And so when the pressure's on, there's no overthinking. When it's time to move, it's time to move. And in a firefight, in Iraq, when you're dealing with explosives, and then there's a firefight going on as well. It's amazing how quickly you make decisions. And I would say 90% of the time you've made the right decision. So, people say, hey, everything's slowed down and I could see real clearly. I've never had that everything slowed down experience. But I have certainly had the experience where I need to decide right now and execute. Right. So moments of clarity, maybe, but in that case, there was a trained teammate somewhere over there who was going to save my life if I could just find him. And
right. Yeah. It's like, I went through civilian SEER, and there was this small moment where I had the opportunity to escape. This very small moment. If we were to replay this again, I don't know if it would go the same way it went, but you're right. Like, in that heat of the moment, like, you're just quickly transitioning and to save yourself, but how do you, you're an award-winning CEO, you're a business guy. How do you not overthink in business? Because this is not life or death. People aren't shooting at us, and things do happen in business where it's not, I want to say it's not urgent, but like we said, like nobody's dying, right? And in a way, like we overthink a bit more because of that
Sure.
that reason. So how do you
Sure.
what advice do you have for that?
So I love the question because I do speak and I conduct events, and this is a very common topic, if you will. You're right. Nobody's dying. It's not life or death. And we say that often in the business environment. But what's really happening is, in my case, I have 40 employees, and those 40 employees are relying on me to make the right decision. Mm-hmm. And if I get stuck, if I don't decide, I'm holding them up. And if I'm holding them up, I'm distracting them from what they should be doing, what their day-to-day job is. So I have to be decisive. And this is something that is a characteristic of very successful CEOs and other leaders, is that they're decisive. It doesn't mean we always get it right. And that comes to the life and death factor, right? Hey, I've got 70 or 80% of what I think I need to know to make this decision, but I'm going to make the decision and we're moving out. Mm-hmm. And if I get it wrong, then I'm going to own up to that and we're going to move on from there. So the short answer to your question, after just giving the long answer, is if you're in a leadership position and you have decisions to make, know that people are relying on you. They're counting on you. Their livelihood depends on you making the right decision and moving out. And I'll just give you a quick little example. Something that I use: is the decision important? Is it urgent? Is it both? Or is it neither? And so within that little matrix, I can prioritize to some degree.
My mentor, who's also has an episode on the show, the other day, it was just like, I'm just not successful in the business. And he goes, well, I'd say you're very successful. You're very successful in figuring out what's not working. And then pivoting, because he's like, it's not about making the right or wrong decision. It's about making a decision and learning how to make a decision, and then hoping that decision isn't like the worst possible decision, So, it's getting over that fear of needing something to be perfect. And for someone like you, I mean, in your line of work, it had to be perfect. There were lives on the line,
Right.
And,
right.
So how does that correlate? And what have you learned from that helps translate to be successful in life?
Sure. So, my career in Navy EOD really prepared me for a career in business. And now when I first retired, I couldn't even spell the word business, but I knew what I wanted to do. And therefore I discovered what I had to learn. So now
what did you want to do?
I wanted to establish this business. iFLY Virginia Beach indoor skydiving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So okay. I wanted to build, own, and operate this facility in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Gotcha. I mean, amongst the other things I wanted to do, this is the one that I really focused in on. And this one had the kind of highest risk reward, relationship as well. So
it was fun.
But so I put myself through, again, going back to Marty's observation of learning machine. I discovered what I needed to learn. I went and learned it. And then I put it into the practical application or the lab setting. I went to the classroom and learned the academics, BUSINESS. I think I got that right. Mm-hmm. And then, take that and develop a business plan develop a working model, a business plan, present that to investors. And then I got an investor to say, yep, let's do that. And then now it's the execution phase. It's the field.
I just want to ask you, how many no's did it take before your yes?
So I got lucky there. I built a list of 10 potential investors. First one said no. Second one said no. Third one said, I'm interested in this, but what about this? What about that? What about, these other things? That discussion lasted a year. And then after a year, that third person said yes.
Okay.
So, and that was a very exciting time.
Okay. So you didn't even reach the rest of the list. You just kind of went one individual and then.
Yep. Got to number 3. I got lucky. I got to number 3 and it was a go. So
yeah. And you had the patience, obviously, to work with this person for a whole entire year before they said yes.
Key point there. Key point.
Yeah.
It's patience, and another word would be endurance. Okay. So I have been through several endurance events throughout my entire life, a 26-year military career, which this potential investor took note of. I have a graduate degree that I got, and it doesn't mean I'm a big brain. It just means that I was able to start and finish, right? And so that's something of note. I completed a marathon, only one, but it was the Blue Angels Marathon in 1999 in Pensacola, Florida. And my wife and I did it together. But not everybody who starts those things, a marathon or a graduate program, finishes them. And many people never step up to the starting line to begin with. Mm-hmm. So these are qualities that I presented to who's now my partner. And these are actually things that they're looking for beyond the business plan. Who am I going to enter into this long-term relationship with? So it was as much about bringing or giving them confidence in me to build, own, and operate responsibly, profitably, because in the private sector, we're talking about profitably, ROI. And so that was part of that year-long process as well. Hey, go look these things up. What about this? What about that? But it was also an observation of who is this guy and is he in it for the long haul?
Gotcha. Yeah. I feel like I could really only speak for myself, but patience is something that I'm realizing you got to be in it for the long haul. We see on social media now, first of all, that really helps bring our attention span to a 0. And then It also makes us see like success, and we forget that it's not overnight. And those that are overnight, well, you're forgetting about the 10 years where you didn't even know about them. So
that's right.
Understanding that patience, I think is something that not many people would stick with. They'd go to the 4th person or the 5th person, the 6th person. So what made you stick with this person?
A couple of things. One is they treated me very well. They were very respectful. And at some point I could see they were mentoring me. They were helping develop my business acumen. They didn't say, hey, Bob, today we're going to sit down and do business 101. They would ask me questions about certain aspects of the business plan or construction or whatever that they knew the answer to, but they were pretty certain I didn't know the answer to. Mm-hmm. So I would have to go do all this research and discovery and bring it back to them. And it's like, okay, grasshopper, you've done well, young Jedi. Okay. Young Jedi trainee, so that was, and when I recognized that, I really appreciated it. I just felt so much gratitude, that I was being treated so well. And that was probably 14 years ago. We've been open for 9 years. It took 6 years to go from good idea till the day we opened. But wow. the other, and the other part of that is you mentioned the kind of instant gratification, right? So there were 5 solid attempts to build this facility in Virginia Beach before I took a look at it, and I tracked down either the individual or the groups, people who tried to do this. And I was like, what happened? Where'd you go wrong? And it's kind of like you said, they just they ran out of patience. They just, they couldn't get the money from this person or that person. And they're like, they didn't go through number 10. They got to number 3. They got their third no or fourth no. And they're like, this is too much. I'm not doing this. So there's a long haul factor there.
I was listening to a story, and this guy mentioned to his son, he was selling painting doors or whatever, like painting numbers for houses. And after the first day, the son goes back to the car after his father picks him up and was like, I'm done. I'm out. Too many people slamming doors in my face. Like, no. And his father was like, every 45 no's, you're going to get a yes. If I told you that, go back tomorrow and, you'll be more hungry, right? So every single time he got a no, he got excited because he was like, it's one step closer to that 45, to that yes, right? And then when his father picked him up, he was like, how'd it go? And he was like, it was amazing, because it was like all these no's led to all these yeses, and when he looked at it that way, and when I approach schools for presenting myself as an author, I always look at that. I'm always like, I email 1,000 people and I get 3 schools, it's that long game of just no's to yeses. And you've been, do you believe what you went through in the Navy and all the learning and everything like that, that's what kept you in it for the long haul? And what advice do you have for others who are just like, who don't want to, who it's too hard?
Yeah. So, and kind of answering one of your previous questions and this one at the same time, EOD, Special Operations, prepared me to put this business plan together, mm-hmm. and to have a long-term vision, and to realize it was going to take a long time, and to stick with it, and to be meticulous, and to discover something new every single day that was an integral part of the overall development and the overall operation. So there's this energy and this motivation that people have to have, and so Special Operations prepared me for that. But there's the entrepreneurial spirit that we always hear about, mm-hmm. and I'm an entrepreneur, and I help mentor other entrepreneurs. But entrepreneurs are curious. Entrepreneurs are up late at night reading the how-to book, mm-hmm. Or doing whatever needs to be done. There's all these memes and these cartoons and things, and entrepreneurs laying in bed thinking, I forgot to do this, I need to do that, and all these different ideas. And, Elon Musk is the epitome of that, where, he said at a very young age, he realized he was different because he just had all these ideas that he wanted to explore. And that continues with him today, and with me to a much lesser extent, but it's still there. I'm a firm believer that one thing leads to another. So my Navy diving career at a very young age led to Navy EOD. Navy EOD led to the discovery. I couldn't spell the word college when I graduated high school, but Navy EOD led to the discovery of education in a way that just worked for me. It worked so well for me. Besides all the military schooling that I went to, I went to school on my own and got a graduate degree. And again, it didn't make me a big brain. As a matter of fact, what I got out of my graduate program was I learned how to read and write. And that learning how to read and write led me to interest in business, and the development of a business plan, and ultimately writing my own book. So I think that that people who are very successful, they're highly energetic, and they build on their success. They take the thing that they just did and they use that as a stepping stone to do the next thing. And if you're not doing that, I think there's a factor of waste that that's just, it's terrible.
How do we, well, I mean, I guess in a way it's like, you mentioned having high energy, that's what's gonna, I'm being curious and wanting to learn and having that passion and stuff. how can others I ask everyone this question towards the end of our time. I always ask, like, how can others just improve themselves, and I feel like, you mentioned we just waste, you mentioned like we can just how can we avoid that and just start improving ourselves and the life around us?
Sure. So a key component of special operations people, something I probably should have mentioned earlier, and Marty may have mentioned this in your discussion with him, is intellectual curiosity, right? We want to know how things work. We want to know who's behind different things. We want to know what the impact is if it happens. What's the impact if it doesn't happen? We have this intellectual curiosity. And Marty takes that to a couple different levels. That's really, really cool in his new book. But beyond that, or I should say, one of the things that fuels that, one of the things that enables intellectual curiosity is health and wellness. It's physical health and mental wellness. And this has become very big in the business community and in the military community for a variety of reasons. And my discovery was through treatment for TBI, traumatic brain injury. And it was all about how the brain works and how the physical conditioning of the body fuels the brain or conditions the brain, the heart and the brain, actually. So here's the answer to your question. There's 6 things that people need to pay attention to every day. You have to deliberately address the following 6 things every single day: rest or sleep, hydration, nutrition, exercise, brain and heart health, and lifelong learning. And I speak about these things, and part 2 of my book is all about that. And I express those 6 things as a Venn, right? These intersecting circles, because they all touch each other. They all impact each other. If I'm not well rested and I'm not well hydrated and I'm not well nourished, but I go to exercise, that exercise will not benefit my brain and heart as much as it would have had I been well rested, well hydrated, well nourished. So those 6 things, if one of them is negatively impacted, it'll have a corresponding effect on all the others. It's just that simple. And daily, we have to tend to these things. So, and I'll just give a quick example. Water, hydration. How much water should we consume on a daily basis? Most people don't know the answer to that question. But even if you do know the answer to that question, then the follow-up is, how much water do you consume on a daily basis? And most people can't answer that. Most people say, not enough. And they're right when they say that. So by simply knowing how much water you should consume on a daily basis, and then get a monitoring device, get something, a meter, I don't have it here now, which is unusual, but a 32-ounce Nalgene bottle, which for me, I have to have 3 of those per day to maintain minimum hydration levels as recommended by the American Academy of Health Science. But if you're not well hydrated, the brain and heart link is negatively impacted. And so we talked earlier about split-second decision-making or general decision-making, important, urgent, both, neither. If I'm not well nourished, if I'm not well hydrated, I might miss something in that thought process. And I have a whole nother discussion about thinking called metacognition, but I might miss something in that thought process simply because I'm not well hydrated. And it's cumulative. Not well hydrated, my mental performance, or what's called executive function. Executive function is working memory, it's mental flexibility, and it's self-control and discipline. If I'm not well hydrated, not well rested, I might miss something. My executive functioning is reduced. I might say something that I later regret saying. I might do something that I later regret doing just because I wasn't well hydrated or well rested or well nourished. If you're not well rested, and there's research, I mean, this is not the theory according to Bob, right? This is what I learned when I had the great benefit of going through some veteran treatment programs, and it was so impactful on me that I explored everything much further and made it part 2 of my book. So there's your long answer. Short answer is pay attention to health and wellness. And I approach that, when we talk about leadership, I approach that in 3 different ways. The first way is mono. How am I right now? Am I well rested? Am I prepared to be here and do what I have to do? Am I prepared to have a discussion with somebody, whatever a business negotiation, a tough discussion, whatever it is? What's my mental status? What's my physical status? That's mono. Stereo is, what's the condition of the person sitting across the table from me? Are they in their peak state? Are they ready to receive this discussion? If it's a sales pitch, or if I'm trying to convince somebody of something, I want to catch them in their peak state when they're hearing what I'm saying and they're analyzing and they get the message I'm trying to convey. And if it's at the end of the day and somebody's had a long day and they're sleepy, or they're in what's called a trough, that's not the best time to go ask somebody to give you a lot of money, or whatever that ask is, right?
Yeah.
So there's mono, what condition am I in? Stereo, what condition are you in? And then surround, what is the condition of the audience, of everybody in the room? Are they very receptive right now? And if not, maybe I have to shape that a little bit before I get to the ask or the presentation or whatever it is. So that is what I call this kind of 360-degree visibility, this omnidirectional understanding of the environment that you're in. And that's a key thing in EOD and special operations is we call it atmospherics, right? Environmental atmospherics. What's going on right here, right now?
What I do have a question following up that. There's so much really great stuff. When it comes to the 6 things, right? You're a business owner, and you're running and you have a family, and you do other things, right? So balance is a really important. It's an important word, right? And I want to know, do you have a schedule, where you're I'm scheduling my gym time. I'm scheduling my eating time. Do you have how strict is your schedule? And how flexible are you with it? And how can you give others that advice when they're just I'm too busy working to go to the gym or to go do this or to get up and I don't want to pee 6,000 times a day.
So a friend of mine, Coach David, works with executives quite often. And he asks those executives to prioritize what's 1, 2, and 3 in your life. And health and wellness usually comes out at number 5 or number 6, which is terrible. It should be number 1. It should absolutely be number 1. Those 6 things that I mentioned, I address those every single day. So I do have a schedule, and I need to get better about sticking to my schedule, because I see shiny objects in a squirrel like other people do. And I try to avoid that. But yoga, for example. So I did yoga this morning, and I'm really diligent about doing yoga 4 to 5 times a week. And so my yoga class is 6:30 in the morning. Every now and then, somebody will want to go have a business breakfast. And it's people I want to talk to, and I'm really excited about doing that stuff. And so every now and then I would sacrifice my yoga in the morning, or on a non-yoga day, it's, the gym, but I would sacrifice that to go have a breakfast or go do other things. I no longer do that. I mean, it's got to be a pretty lucrative deal for me to sacrifice. So that is sacrosanct. That is religious, whatever the word is. I have to be disciplined and stick to that schedule of fitness, physical activity, because I know the benefit of it. I know the benefit because I feel it my entire adult life. My body's been telling me, I don't know what this is, but it's great. Well, what it is serotonin and dopamine. It's the best drugs in the world that your body is naturally programmed to release and reward you with after you put in the work. So I know that. And I know when the serotonin is happening. I can feel it like a drug. It's really amazing. Runner's high, epinephrine, neoepinephrine, all these other crazy things that happen in your brain when you put in that work. So, but again, it helps to have a team around you. I have a culture of fitness within my facility. So I will purchase a pass to the rec. We have great rec centers in Virginia Beach. An annual pass is $100. Anybody in my company who wants one, we will purchase it for them. I have a little workout station here in the building. We have TRX every now and then. It's a physical activity being an instructor at iFLY. So we have a pull-up bar. And so we will do little pull-up competitions. When there's certain races, half marathon, I've sponsored, I pay for my people to go do those races. So a culture of fitness from a leadership perspective is critical. And you can only enable it if you model it. You have to model that yourself. I walk around with my water bottle, and people know that. And if my Misty, who runs, she's our chief marketing officer. She came in here one day. My water bottle was on my desk and it was empty. And she grabbed it and went and filled it. And she said, "Hey, hydrate."
Wow.
So yeah. So you have to prioritize. You have to say, "Hey, yeah. And some people, they feel selfish by doing that. But the more you take care of this, the better you can serve others. It's really simple.
Yeah. I mean, you have to put on your oxygen mask before you help other people.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. So prioritize it personally, model it, and enable it for those around you. And it's been, for me, it's part of the magic. It's a key component of the success that I've had.
Wow, I really enjoyed talking with you. It was really insightful for me. Like I said, we've never had an EOD on the show. And I really enjoyed learning as much as I did. So thank you so much for being here. I am very grateful.
For sure. And I'll leave you with this.
Yes,
Since
please.
I'm the first Navy EOD tech that you've had on the show, in the military, especially in Navy Special Ops, whenever it's the first time for something, you owe a case of beer. So in your travels, when you come and stop by Virginia Beach, be sure to bring a case of beer with you.
I'll make sure to do that. Thank you so much, everyone that's listening. Please like, share, comment, subscribe now, become a patron member so you get full access to our bonus episodes and extra goodies that only our Patreons get. And tune in next week for our next episode. And thank you so much for listening to the show.